Welcome back. Let's take a look at how our global economy got to be in such a mess. As we discussed with the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, we saw that what started with one small state in the US became a temptation of easy living with no responsibility for paying off those debts. This is something that is felt around the world. I doubt if there's a country in the world right now that doesn't have its fair share of problems with people who are tempted to go into debt for luxuries that they cannot afford. We have only to look at the banking institutions, the financial institutions, with people who've got mortgages for nothing down or just 5 or 10% down, who would not have qualified as creditworthy if the banks had really vetted these people properly. Now let's take a look at cash advances. Again, this is something that credit card companies have made much too easy for its users. If it's used appropriately for emergencies and for nothing else, consumers might be better able to pay off these debts. Unfortunately, many people look at a cash advance differently. They ignore the fact that their finance charges start the minute they make that cash advance, and that interest keeps accruing every single day from the first day of that loan. If they bothered to do the maths, they'd have the option of seeing whether or not taking that cash advance was really of benefit to them. More often than not, these cash advances are not paid off quickly, but they just get added to their ongoing credit card debt. Not enough people look at their statement each month to see how much money is going towards their cash advance and how much money is going towards their monthly charge. And those rates differ greatly. Now let's take a look at balance transfers. The average consumer sees a balance transfer as a quick way to pay off their credit cards, perhaps by combining all their payments into 1, 2 or 3 payments instead of maybe 10 payments. And if it were that simple, perhaps their credit card debt would be much more manageable. But let's look at some of the seductive ways that banks have of tempting you to do these balance transfers. During the good times, banks will offer a 0% finance charge for a certain amount of months, and then a higher charge for the remainder of the loan. And if you just looked at that, it might seem reasonable. But money has a way of making you greedy. So you may not look too closely at the fact that you might be paying $90 or even $120 for every transaction you make on this balance transfer. Let's say you want to pay off 4 of your credit cards, and you're going to transfer them onto this one credit card so that you've only one payment a month. For each of those 4 cards that you're transferring balances from to this one card, you'll have to pay a fee of at least $90 per transaction. So you'll be paying an extra $360 just for transferring the monies on these 4 cards. So you may be getting 0% financing for 6 months. However, and this is a big however, in smaller print, banks are telling you that they've the right to change that balance transfer offer as they see fit. So now you're thinking you're going in at 0% for the next 6 months and 9% after that until the balance is paid off. And now a few months later you get your statement in the mail, and if you look closely enough, you may be very surprised to see your interest rate go from 9% to 13.9% because your bank does and often will change your original offer. Here's another eye-opener. You call your bank and you want to know what the payoff amount is because now you've got enough money to pay the balance. You ask them to figure out the finance charges and to add it to what you're supposed to be paying. And you think to yourself when you make that payment that you're finished with it. Not so fast. Your next statement comes and lo and behold, there are more finance charges that have been accrued that you still owe. So it's very easy to see how credit card debt starts and how it escalates and how hopeless it seems for a lot of individuals. And if you're one of the many consumers who looks at your statement and says, oh, I just have to pay $15 and that's the minimum amount due, and then you ignore the balance of everything else that's due, then you're one of those people who are just paying down the interest on the loan and not a penny off the principal of the loan. So we've covered credit cards, cash advances and balance transfers. And to summarize, here are my tips. Keep 1 or 2 of your credit cards and cut the rest up. Look at your statement carefully each month and see how much you're paying in finance charges, what your APR rate is, so you'll know what percentage of your debt is going towards finance charges. Try not to use cash advances and try to pay your credit cards off as quickly as you can, both interest and principal. I had a letter from a viewer, Alison P, about last week's show. And she says, "Dear Mrs. Goldsmith, on the last show, you told us to deny ourselves something 3 times a day. I did that. It's really difficult, and my children are absolutely impossible when I deny them anything. Isn't there a shortcut to this? Well, thank you for your letter. You're changing habits of a lifetime, and it takes time to make the adjustments. It's always hardest at first, but once you get used to it and you make it into a habit, then it will get easier. Stick with it and you will reap the rewards. And if any viewers have an issue you'd like me to discuss, please contact CTV 03377 7033, email inquiries@ctv.co.nz or write to 249 Madras Street, Christchurch. Next week we'll discuss the housing market, the dangers, the pitfalls and the potential benefits. See you next week.